Welcome to my presentation. I'm Raswa Kivutuli and I'm going to talk about seams. We tackle the definition, types of seams, factors, and factors used to when choosing a seam. So these are the lesson objectives, and the learners should be able to classify seams, state the qualities of a well-made seam, and explain the factors in choice of a seam. First, definition of a seam refers to a method of joining two pieces of fabric together forming stitches, and it can be functional or decorative, or both functional and decorative. This is a video illustrating on how to work out various types of seams. Let's pay attention as we watch.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to learn about the basic seam types. Okay guys, let's start to learn about these seam types. Hem finished seam. This hem finish is commonly used in every garment and other sewing projects. Sometimes use overlock or just fold the hem twice. The constructions. Prepare a piece of fabric and mark the folding line. The size is depend on the width of the seam desired. Fold it or roll it just like this. Stitch the seam as close as possible to the folded line. How to make it. Prepare a piece of fabric, turn to the wrong side, fold it twice. The size is depend on the width desired. Press it. It can be ironed to make it stay still. And then ready to sew. Try to stitch as close as possible to the folded seam line. And here is the result. The right side has flat surface with top stitching, and the wrong side is just like this. Plain seam, open seam. This seam is common on garment and easy to make, usually used in shoulder, back, and often in all parts of the garment. The constructions. Place the first fabric and mark the seam line. Place the second fabric right side together and mark the seam line. Sew the stitch to the seam line. Overlock the seam allowance edge on each piece separately. The construction when it's open is like this. How to make it. Prepare two pieces of fabric. Mark the right side and wrong side. Put it in layer right side together. Mark the seam line about 1 cm seam allowance. Ready to sew. Remember to lock the stitch in the beginning and at the end of the seam line. Sew the both fabrics in the seam line. Trim the thread. Open the garment sample. Turn to the wrong side where the seam allowance is. Open seam allowance and press it in the middle. Overlock the seam allowance edge each side separately. The purpose of overlocking is to avoid the fraying. Here is the result of the right side. The right side in this seam usually used for the outside of the garment, and this is how the wrong side looks like with the open seam. Plain seam, closed seam. This seam is more common to use in the part of the garment and other sewing crafts. The constructions. Put the first piece of fabric and mark the seam line. Put the second piece on top and mark the seam line. Sew the stitch to the seam line. Overlock the two pieces of seam allowance together. How to make it. Prepare two pieces of fabrics. Mark the right side and the wrong side. Put it in layer right side together and then ready to sew with 1 cm seam allowance. Remember to lock the stitch in the beginning and at the end of the seam line. Sew the both fabrics following the seam line. Trim the thread. Open the garment sample. Turn to wrong side where the seam allowance is, and then prepare to overlock the seam allowance edge. Overlock the two pieces together until the end of the seam line. And here is the result seen from the wrong side. We can see the overlock in the edge of the seam allowance, and this side is the right side. Plain seam, closed seam with double top stitching. Actually, this is just a closed seam, but adding 2 top stitching. It's common in some denims and some other swing seams depend on the purpose. The constructions. Do the same steps as the closed seam. Open the sample like this so it will be in the right side. And then 2 top stitching next to seam line and the seam allowance edge. How to make it. Prepare the fabric. Do the same steps as the closed seam. Open the garment sample and put the seam allowance in the one side. And add the first top stitching close to the seam line where the seam allowance is under it, so it will be attached with the stitch. The result will be like this. And then do the second stitching. Try to make it in the top of the seam allowance edge, so it will be neat in the wrong side. The result from the right side is like this, with 2 top stitchings. And then the wrong side will be like this with overlock. French seam. The French seam has the same look as plain seam in the right side, while the wrong side has neat seam allowance finish without overlocking. The constructions. Put the pieces of fabric in layer wrong side together, sew the seam line, open the fabric to cover the seam allowance, just like this, and then sew the new seam line to cover the seam allowance. How to make it. Prepare 2 pieces of fabrics. Mark the right side and wrong side. Put it in layer wrong side together. Sew the both fabrics with ½ cm seam allowance. And then open the sample like this. And then fold to the other side. Now, right side will be together. Press the seam line to make it neat. And then ready to sew with 1 cm seam allowance. Sew along the seam line until finished. The result from the right side just looks like plain seam. And the wrong side will be like this neat without overlock. Machine fell seam. This seam looks like a plain seam with double top stitching, but the wrong side is different, neat without overlock. The constructions. first fabric with 1 cm seam allowance, the second fabric with 2 cm seam allowance, then stitch the seam line. The both fabrics will have 1 cm different seam allowance. Fold the longer seam allowance to cover the short ones, and then fold the short fabric to cover all the seam allowance, just like this, and then add the top stitching. How to make it. Prepare 2 pieces of fabrics. First fabrics with wrong side on the top, and then put the second fabric on top of the first, so will be wrong side together and the seam allowance has 1 cm gap like this. So it will be one fabric has 2 cm seam allowance and the other one has only 1 cm seam allowance. And then stitch the seam line 2 cm from the edge of the seam allowance. The result will be like this. Open the garment sample with right side in the top. This is how the seam allowance looks like. They have 1 cm different size between the both fabric. Fold the wider seam allowance to cover the narrow seam allowance. Continue to roll it like this. And then do the top stitching as close as possible to the edge of seam allowance. This is right side with 2 top stitchings. And then the wrong side with 1 top stitching, knit without overlock. Let's have a quick look about plain seam with top stitching and machine fell seam. The both right sides have the same look. The difference is in the wrong side. The wrong side of plain seam has overlock finish, while the right side of machine fell is knit without overlocking. Lap seam. The lap seam usually used for decorations, easy and quick to make. The constructions. The first fabric as a base. Fold the second fabric and spare 1 to 1.5 cm for seam allowance. Sew the stitching line, and then finish the seam with overlocking. How to make it. Prepare 2 pieces of fabrics. First fabric with right side on the top, and then put the second fabric on the top of the first one right side together. Open and fold the second fabric like this, so the folding distance to the seam allowance edge is about 2 cm. And then sew in the stitch line about ½ cm from the folding line. Here is the ½ cm lap seam. The seam allowance is about 1.5 cm for easy overlocking.
So that was a video tutorial on how to work basic types of seams. Now let's move to now let's Move to types of seams. We have conspicuous, and examples are overlaid and machine fail seam. Stitches are visible on the right side, hence giving a decorative effect. They are both functional and decorative. In conspicuous seams, we have French seam and open seam. The stitches are shown on the wrong side of the fabric. Then factors to consider for the choice of a seam: type of garment. Outer garment don't require same type of seams as inner pieces. For example, a pant machine fail seam would be chosen because it will be flat and comfortable. Then type of fabric being used. For example, fabrics that fray easily requires self-knitting seams, and self-knitting seams is French seam. Then the effect desired: if it should be seen on the right side, choose appropriately. Then position of the seam: plain seam and double seam will be appropriate for armholes. Then style of the garment. This depends on how you want your garment to look like. For example, if you want your garment to have a fastening or a zip, you will have to use open seam and French seam. Then let's move to qualities of a well-made seam. We have it should be strongly stitched to last long, neatly stitched to enhance appearance, matched where they cross each other. For example, on your garment we have the shoulder seam and the armhole. So when you are joining your sleeve to the armhole, the seam used on the armhole should match with the seam on the sleeve. Then of appropriate width and equal in all parts of the garment, well pressed and flat. Procedure for working different types of seams, and I will start with plain seam. This is a complete diagram of plain seam, and we have here, this is the right side, which shows the blue color. Then this sky blue is the wrong side of the garment. So procedure number 1: place 2 pieces of fabric together, right side facing each other, as I have told you, and then match the raw edges stitching line together. Then stitch along the fitting line. After stitching along the fitting line, you trim the raw edges. Then knitting using binding, overcasting, and overcasting. Then press flat the completed seam. And then the next seam is open seam. Open seam is done like plain seam, but to the raw edges we will neaten it using these methods. And method number 1, As you see in this diagram, we have the raw edges being opened separately and knitted using zigzag method, and then number 2 is used a cording method, number 3 double folding method, and number 4 loop stitching, and then number 5 pinking, then the last one, number 6, binding. Like the procedure is same as for the plain seam, but the difference is the open seam, the raw edges are knitted separately, while plain seam, the raw edges are knitted together. And then qualities of a well-made open seam. It should be of even width, then made using straight stitches to look attractive, and then well knitted, have a seam allowance of 0.5 centimeters. Then let's move to another type of seam. We have overlaid seam. These are diagrams of how overlaid seam looks like. So in the process number 1, we put together two fabrics, matching the fitting line and the stitching line and the raw edges. And then overlaid seam, the overlay fabric should be folded on the 1.5 centimeter, then placed and over the underlay onto the fitting line of the underlay, then stitch close to the edge, and after stitching close to the edge, we will come to the completed seam, this process number 3. Then you will knit the raw edges as for plain seam. Then machine fell seam is also known as double or flat seam. And procedure number 1, place 2 pieces of fabric together. Place together 2 pieces of fabric, right side facing, pin, tack and back stitch on the fitting line, remove pins and tacking, cut down one seam allowance to 0.5 centimeters, fold the wider edge over the trimmed fabric, pin, tack and hem flat the folded edge to the wrong side. So this is a finished seam. And this process number 4, the back has been trimmed to 0.5 centimeters. After the back has been trimmed, we use the front fabric to fold over the back so that it encloses the raw edges. Then after enclosing the raw edges, we stitch close to the raw edge on the stitching line to enclose the raw edges. Then press a completed seam. This is a short video on the illustration of how to make a machine fell seam. For those who have not understood, they can watch it and get the content very well.
Hi
Jennifer from Workroom Social, and today I'm going to show you how to sew a flat-felled seam. So a flat-felled seam encases the raw edge of the seam allowance, and this is a very common way to finish seams that you see on jeans and on sportswear. So to demonstrate that today, we're going to need to identify the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm just going to mark my two wrong sides. And I'm going to start by sewing wrong sides together. I'm going to line up my fabric, wrong sides together, and I'm going to sew a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm lining up my fabric with the raw edge on the 5/8 guide on my seam guide. And I'm just sewing a straight stitch. I'm using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I'm just going to go all the way down to the bottom. Okay. Now, so we have our wrong sides together, and our right sides with the seam allowance up. So the next thing I want to do is to just finger press the seam open. So it lies a little bit flat, a little flatter. And then I want to trim one side of the seam allowance down short, because we're going to encase it with the other seam allowance. So I'm going to trim this down and leave about between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. Now, to hide all these raw edges, I'm just going to take this larger seam allowance and fold it under, and then fold the whole thing over. So everything is hidden. And then you'll just pin it in place. And then you can just move up your seam to do the whole thing. And of course, if you're uncomfortable doing this by eye, you can get your seam guide out or a ruler and measure this fold so that it's all nice and even. So we have our seam in place, and then we're just going to go to the sewing machine and stitch close to this fold all the way down to secure our seam. So we'll go back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to lower the presser foot, and I'm just going to eyeball close to this edge. Now, when you're doing this, you can always use the edge of the inside of the presser foot as your guide for an edge stitch. Where my presser foot has little notches on the right-hand side that are also really useful reference guides. Okay, and there we have our flat-felled seam, and this is the right side, and this is the wrong side. Of course, depending on your preference, you can always choose to use this seam look for your right side, if that's what you would prefer, and put this on the wrong side. It's really up to you. But that's how you sew a flat-felled seam.
Okay, we'll continue with another. type of seam. This is let me go through the procedure of machine fell seam. We place two pieces of fabric together, right side facing, pin and tack and back stitch on the fitting line, remove pins and tacking, then trim the back garment to 0.5 centimeters. Fold the wider edge over the trimmed garment. Pin, tack and hem flat the folded edge to the wrong side. After that, you press your completed seam. Let's move to French seam. French seam is suitable for delicate fabrics that fray easily, and it is a self-knitting seam. And here are samples of a French seam. So step 1, you sew wrong sides together and trim seam allowance, both seam allowance to 0.6 centimeters. Then step 2, after trimming, you turn your work to right side. Now step 1, wrong sides were facing, while step 2, right sides are facing, and stitch close to the seam, and that is a completed French seam. Another type of seam, you have double stitch. And double stitch is a strong seam with 2 rows of stitching showing equally well on both sides. It is used on garments worn often. And garments worn often, for example, students, those who are in high school, and even primary pupils, their school uniforms, they are usually worn often, so double stitch can be suitable to their garments. And then worked entirely on right side is a self-knitting seam. If you are not keen with this, you may think that double stitch seam is a machine fell seam. Now this is a picture of how double stitch seam look like. Then next, let me go through the procedure for working out a double stitch seam. Number 1, you place two pieces of fabric together, wrong side facing, pin and tack along the stitching line, remove pins and back stitch, or if you don't want to back stitch, you may use machine stitching. Trim one edge to 0.5 centimeter, then fold the wider edge over the trimmed garment, pin and tack, remove pins and machine along the folded edge on right side, then remove tackings, then press the completed seam. Then conclusion, we have terms which are usually used in seam, and one is trimming. This is cutting edges to reduce seam allowance, or cutting off loose threads after sewing. And when you cut loose threads, you reduce bulkiness on a seam. Then layering, cutting off layers of fabric on a seam to reduce bulk so as to make it lie flat. Snipping, this small cut made on a curved edge to create ease, and this snipping is usually applied on when making a collar. When you observe your collar, you'll see that on the curve it's very smooth and the corners it's sharp pointed. That is the work of snipping. So I want you to do an assignment, and it is about differences between machine fell seam and run and fell seam. And then to emphasize on the definition of a seam is a method of binding two or more pieces of fabric together using thread to form stitches. And then someone can define it as a method of joining two pieces of fabric using glue, pins, and other forms of adhesive. And remember, self-knitting seam is a French seam. Thank you. Nifinya end ama ni stop?